"Miss, what if my heart stops beating?" The 7-year-old's trembling voice cut through the hush of the Seattle diner, splintering Hannah's heart. Every night, the 25-year-old waitress clutched Rosie, a doll belonging to her late sister, to soothe her own loneliness. But that evening, seeing Amelia's fear on the eve of surgery, Hannah handed over Rosie, even as it felt like a blade in her chest. She didn't know Amelia was the daughter of a wealthy single father. Could one act of kindness heal profound wounds and piece together a family from broken fragments? All right, my dear audience, prepare for a story that will leave you speechless. Take a moment to hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always thrilling to see viewers joining us from around the world. Wind howled through Seattle's cobblestone streets, carrying November's biting chill into every crack and collar. Outside, Elliott Bay lay gunmetal gray, its ripples scattering the city lights like shards of broken glass. But inside the rusty Ancora, snug waterfront diner, warm amber light and boisterous laughter fought back the cold. Hannah, 25, with her brown hair tied high and a sheen of sweat on her brow, wove swiftly between packed tables of regulars. The faded apron at her hips swished each time she poured more coffee or nodded thanks for a tip. She was the soul of this place, not just for her efficiency, but for the gentle heart behind those deep brown eyes. Tonight, the crowd was larger than usual. The clatter of dishes and the crackle of old jazz records painted a scene of cozy respite against winter's harshness. Thena's soft sound, nearly lost in the din, reached Hannah's ears, a stifled sob from a corner table. She paused. By a fogged window, a frail 7-year-old girl sat huddled beside her weary father. The child clutched a crumpled tissue, her tiny fingers trembling. Her wide eyes brimmed with tears as she looked up at him and whispered, "Daddy, what if I don't wake up after my surgery?" The room fell silent. A shock ran down Hannah's spine. That question, that look, she knew them all too well. They carried her back 10 years, to her sister Grace lying in a hospital bed, lips blue and voice faint. Also born with a faulty heart, also reliant on a gamble of surgery, and ultimately, that loss. She inhaled deeply, gripping her order pad like a lifeline, but her heart felt shattered. Without hesitation, Hannah knelt to the girl's level, her face softened, eyes warm as a blanket. She offered a smile, not the polite grin of a server, but a quiet promise from one heart to another. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "may I tell you about a very special friend?" Amelia looked up, surprised, then nodded. Hannah reached into her apron pocket and withdrew a small, well-worn doll. Its dress was faded sky blue, the fabric threadbare, one button eye dangled by a single stitch. Yet Hannah handled it as if it were treasure. "This is Rosie. My sister made her for me when I was scared. When I lay alone in the hospital, I'd hug Rosie and whisper all my fears. She keeps secrets so well, and I promise you, she knows how to chase away fear." Amelia hesitated, then reached out. When Rosie settled into her tiny arms, something unspoken shifted. The girl pressed the doll to her chest, as though embracing a miracle. Her tears ceased. Her small shoulders stilled, and then timidly her lips curved in a smile, the first warmth of the evening. Her father watched Hannah without words. His eyes shone red, as if a silent, heartfelt "thank you" passed between them. Hannah rose, her hand instinctively brushing the space where Rosie had been against her blouse. For years, Rosie was the sole confidante of Hannah's nightmares, the companion through nights stained with grief for Grace. But tonight, Rosie had a new mission: to stand beside a little girl facing the fight of her life. Hannah returned to the counter, but her thoughts remained at that corner table. A single moment, a small gesture, yet it might change how a child approaches the crucible of surgery. In a world that often feels harsh and rushed, sometimes all we need is someone to stoop down, extend a hand, and share a sliver of hope. For even the coldest November nights can be lit by compassion. James Carter sat in silence. Before him was his daughter, Amelia, clutching the well-worn doll with the whimsical name Rosie. But James's mind could focus on nothing but the woman who had just given it to her. Hannah. Her name had never appeared on any financial report, auction catalog, or million-dollar contract he'd ever perused. Yet now, that name was etched more deeply in his mind than any project he had pursued throughout his life. Amelia's most beloved child had endured one of her darkest days since learning of her congenital heart condition. She had cried herself into panic over the upcoming surgery, despite his best efforts to paint a safe future, despite enlisting the very top medical experts. But throughout that tear-filled ordeal, no one had brought his daughter a single smile until the young waitress. No forced platitudes, no pity, only a gentle gaze, a softly spoken voice, and an old toy he almost failed to recognize as precious, until he saw Amelia whispering her deepest fears into Rosie's stitched ear. James said nothing, yet a strange feeling welled inside him. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced in board meetings, contract signings, or applause from the financial world. No strategy. No agenda, just admiration. A pure admiration for kindness that sought no recognition. He could not explain why a young woman, clearly with no great wealth, had been willing to give away her most treasured possession with not a single hint of regret. While in his own life, everything had been measured in terms of benefit, efficiency, and profit. And that realization stunned him. James was unaccustomed to this feeling, being moved by something unconnected to assets or power. He had once believed he could purchase peace of mind, even hope itself. But tonight, with a worn doll and a stranger's compassion, she achieved what all his medical team could not. A heavy weight settled in his chest as though the principle he had lived by, that money could solve everything, was suddenly being squeezed out of him. But kindness could not be bought. And Hannah had extended it as naturally as breathing, without choice. He sat still, watching his daughter press Rosie to her cheek, eyes half closed, lips moving in a hopeful whisper. He had seen Amelia suffer many nights, her small body trembling as each breath grew fragile. Yet never had he seen her face soften as it did tonight. And he knew it was not his doing. That night, as he carried Amelia back to their hotel room, he felt her heartbeat steady against his chest. Rosie nestled between them, silent witness to the moment a father realized he had learned a lesson. His phone buzzed again and again. The name of a major deal flashed on the screen, an 8-figure acquisition. Normally, a swipe would answer it and set instructions in motion. But this time, he did not touch the screen, because his mind was no longer on that deal. The only image in his head was Hannah, her face, her eyes, the way she stooped to his daughter's level and handed her a piece of memory that should have stayed hers alone. Asking for nothing, oblivious to who he was, expecting nothing in return. For the first time, James Carter, man accustomed to commanding respect, felt small before such simplicity. And he knew he needed to go back, not simply to say thank you. Those words seemed too thin for what he had received. Not to repay her debt, because no amount could encompass the value of such kindness. But to return, to see again the woman who reminded him that some things can only be understood by the heart. The next morning, a silky mist blanketed Seattle, and within the chilly grounds of Seattle Children's Hospital, 7-year-old Amelia Carter was ushered into pre-op. She still looked pale and frail, but Rosie's battered doll in her arms, in its faded blue dress with the wobbly button eye, was held fast against her chest. On the second floor, outside room 204, Hannah stood quietly in her volunteer's white coat. Her eyes were red from sleepless nights, Her late shift at the diner ended at 4 a.m. Yet she had come straight here, the same hospital where she once waited anxiously for news of her sister, Grace. She wasn't here to prove anything. She simply couldn't walk away. When the door opened, Amelia's eyes brightened. "Aunt Hannah," the girl called, her voice small but warm in the hushed corridor. Hannah smiled, crossed the threshold, and sat on the edge of the bed. She gently smoothed back Amelia's hair just as she had for Grace in her final days. Without another word, she produced a small notebook and began weaving an imaginary adventure for Rosie, exploring the snowy forests of Alaska, rocketing to the moon in a cardboard box turned spaceship. Each detail unfurled in Hannah's soothing, unhurried tone, like a lullaby. Amelia managed a tentative smile, though worry still shadowed her eyes. "Is Rosie afraid too, Aunt Hannah?" "Yes," Hannah replied, "but Rosie always hugs her little friend tight, and whenever she's scared, a little magic happens." She then hummed a soft, familiar tuned lullaby Grace once sang to her when she was a trembling child in a hospital bed. The gentle melody drifted through the bright white room, leaving a peaceful hush in its wake. Outside the window, James Carter watched from the corridor. He did not knock or enter. He gripped the frame of the door with hands accustomed to sealing eight-figure deals, trembling. He had met countless doctors and nurses skilled, professional people, yet none moved him as Hannah did. She received no pay to stay, no requirement to tell stories, no obligation to sing. Yet she came, like morning light, day after day, with a patience that flowed without effort. Each morning she brought picture books, sitting for hours by Amelia's bedside, holding the girl's hand through each wave of pain, soothing her panic with unspoken empathy. She was the only person for whom Amelia did not need to be brave. One day, James visited and Amelia handed him a scribbled drawing. "Look, Daddy," she said excitedly. On the page, rendered in crayon, were three figures: a brown-haired woman, a girl with a ribbon in her hair, and Rosith doll with mismatched button eyes holding hands beneath a bright blue sky. Below, a child's scrawl read, "Aunt Hannah, me, and Rosie." James studied the drawing for a long moment. Something tightened in his chest, not merely because Amelia had smiled again, but because in a world where he believed he could buy all the reassurance his daughter needed, it was a woman in faded shoes and a soft lullaby who provided exactly what she needed most. Hannah was no longer a passing stranger. She had become part of his daughter's fragile world, and in James's heart, that meant far more than any number. But Hannah was only human. That evening, after almost 2 sleepless days of working at both the diner and the hospital, she nearly collapsed in the volunteer lounge, her vision blurred, her head spinning. She slumped over the table, still clutching Amelia's drawing, the next story for tomorrow's visit half told. An elderly nurse with silver hair placed a steaming cup of coffee before her. The nurse spoke little, simply sitting beside her with the quiet compassion of someone who had seen many decades pass. "You're doing what money can't buy, dear," she whispered. "Don't ever forget that." Those words brought Hannah to tears, not a storm of sobs, but silent tears falling onto the crayon-colored sketch she gripped so tightly. In that moment, every exhaustion and every old sorrow over her sister welled up, yet this time, it did not crush her. It lifted her. She drew a deep breath, nodded, and straightened. Tomorrow, she would go back to room 204. Still, Hannah, with her hair tied high, her stories of Rosie, her old lullabies. And though she might be spent, she would continue because now she knew the one thing she carried from her sister was not pain, but the gift of giving love, like a little miracle. Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or pour yourself a drink, then stay tuned for the rest of this touching story. Comment number 1 if you've enjoyed it, so we know you're still with us. James Carter sat in stunned silence. Before him, On the soft chair by the window lay a small gift wrapped in silver tissue paper and tied with a pale blue ribbon the same shade as Rosie's dress. He blinked in surprise. No name was written on the package, only a simple handwritten line in black ink. "Thank you for giving my daughter hope. A grateful father." Hannah's hand trembled as she untied the ribbon and slowly peeled back the tissue, its texture like morning mist. Inside, she caught her breath. A doll hand stitched, nearly identical to Rosie in the faded sky blue dress, and button eyes rested within. But this doll was pristine, every detail perfect. She touched its cheek gently, as though confirming it was real. A familiar baritone voice spoke from the doorway. "I had an artisan recreate it exactly as Amelia described." She turned to see James standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee, his gaze hesitant as though unsure whether he should have come. "She told me every detail about Rosie," he said, placing 1 cup on the table and offering her the other. The loose button eye, the faded dress. Hannah accepted the coffee, silent for a long moment. She looked down at the doll cradled in her hands new, more beautiful than the original, yet carrying the soul of something deeply old. "Rosie," she whispered, as if speaking a cherished name, "was the last gift my sister gave me before she passed away." Her voice trembled with withheld emotion. "My sister had a heart condition, too. When I was little, I never understood why she was so frail until the day she didn't wake up." She stopped, eyes misting. "Rosie was all I had to hold on to a piece of her. When I gave it to Amelia, I knew I was giving away my most precious memory. But she needed it. I saw that look in her eyes, the same look I once had." James spoke not a word. He simply stood there, listening, as if each of her words was a gentle pinprick against the armor he'd worn for years. "When my sister died, I vowed to become a nurse," Hannah continued. "I wanted to do something for people like her, but," she managed a wry smile, "I couldn't afford college. I had to work at the Rusty Anchor and volunteer at this hospital, just to be close to the people I wanted to care for." James lowered his head not in sorrow, but in shame. Shame that he had everything she did not: power, prestige, wealth. Yet in the battle to restore his daughter's smile, he had been outdone by a young woman in scuffed shoes and calloused hands, no medical degree or scholarship, yet the only one who reached his daughter's heart in a way all his money could not. "You stayed," James said, his voice low but sincere, "after your shift, after exhaustion. You stayed because of something I forgot, because of love." Hannah offered a soft smile. "Maybe. I need to stay not only for Amelia, but for myself. Here, I'm close to my sister, if only through the children who remind me of her each day." A gentle silence settled, as warm as the first winter sun. James looked at the doll in her hands, an embodiment of all his daughter needed to feel strong, and all that Hannah had sacrificed to learn how to love so fully. He wasn't sure what transformation had been set in motion, only that, in a world built of steel and glass, he had never met anyone like her. And for the first time, he wondered, was his life missing something that money could never buy? A week had passed. In the small confines of room 204, once echoing with hushed sobs of fear and shy laughter of a child battling life and death, now lay neatly folded sheets and morning sunlight slanting through the window. Amelia, slender girl with brown hair and wide eyes, was stronger now. Her cheeks were rosy once more, her steps still a little unsteady but buoyed by newfound life, gentle and bright. Today, she was going home. James stood beside her, signing discharge papers while Amelia clutched something precious. It was not her backpack or a parting gift from a nurse, but Rosie, the old doll who had kept her company through the longest nights of her young life. Yet, as they prepared to leave, Amelia suddenly stopped in the second-floor corridor. She glanced around, then ran toward a familiar figure, Hannah, in her volunteer's coat faded from countless washes, arranging books on a hospital shelf. "Aunt Hannah," Amelia's voice rang out, soft as a breeze, yet brimming with resolve. Hannah turned with a bright smile, but before she could speak, she saw Amelia hold Rosie forward, her small hands cradling the doll as though offering a treasure. "I want to give Rosie back to you," Amelia said, her eyes shining as if passing along a kingdom, not just a doll. "I'm not afraid anymore, and Rosie says you need her more." Hannah froze. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard. But Amelia's gaze and the quiet confidence in her 7-year-old voice were unmistakable, and Hannah could not deny the miracle unfolding before her. She knelt, gently receiving Rosie. When the doll settled into her arms, worn, soft, achingly familiar tears sprang unbidden and rolled down her cheeks. "Thank you for taking care of Rosie," she whispered, then wrapped Amelia in a tight embrace, words unnecessary. In that embrace, every syllable fell short. Hannah did not merely reclaim a doll. She reclaimed a piece of memory, a fragment of her own heart she had thought lost now returned by a child who once trembled, just as Hannah herself had. But this time, Amelia had triumphed, and by running back to Hannah, she passed on the very courage she had learned. At the hospital doorway, James watched quietly. He had witnessed it all, from the moment Rosie was given, to Amelia clutching her each night, and now, a child learning to give back something precious from her own heart. And he knew this gift had not come from him. It came from Hannah, the woman who had never hesitated to give the sole treasure left to her by her late sister. A selfless act, uncalculated, unspoken, but enough for one small girl to learn her first lesson in unconditional love. James stepped closer, his voice low and earnest. "You've given us more than I could ever repay." Hannah met his gaze, still misty. She nodded not in agreement, but in understanding that the two of them, so different, were standing before a truth too real. Healing does not always come from medicine, it comes from humanity. Then, Hannah felt something beneath the doll's skirt. She gently lifted Rosie's dress and found a small, folded piece of paper hidden inside, like a secret letter. She unfolded it. In simple pencil scrawl curvy, endearing were the words, "Rosie says Aunt Hannah is my superhero. Amelia." Hannah pressed the tiny note to her heart as though it were the final missing piece her soul had needed. Those unadorned words from a child brought fresh tears, this time of recognition, of a scar stitched whole by silent gratitude. She hugged Amelia even tighter, speechless, and in that embrace, Hannah knew she, too, was healed. No longer merely the sister haunted by loss, no longer just the quiet waitress working 2 jobs to survive, but the woman who had changed a child's world and, unwittingly, a father's heart as well. A year had passed since the day Hannah received Rosie backhanded to her by the trembling 7-year-old who had whispered, "What if I don't wake up, Daddy?" Yet that memory remains etched in her heart as if it were only yesterday. This morning, a honey-golden sunlight flooded the small kitchen of the house in Bellevue, Washington, slanting through the curtains onto the hardwood floor. The scent of melting butter mingled with a hint of cinnamon in the air, underscored by the cheerful sizzle of pancakes on the griddle. Hannah, now dressed in a soft beige sweater, hair still tied hygently, flipped each pancake with a fluid, unhurried grace, as though she had mastered this kitchen long ago. At the table, 8-year-old Amelia, with her rosy cheeks and mischievous eyes, was busy coloring a picture in wax crayon. She excitedly drew 3 figures in front of a house, a tall man, a brown-haired woman, and herself holding Rosieth's doll, whose pale blue dress had become the symbol of their shared journey. "Aunt Hannah," Amelia called out, holding up her drawing. "Look, this is our home. There's sunshine, pancakes, and Rosie, too." Hannah turned and smiled, her heart swelling with a warmth she hadn't felt in years, like finally living in a spring that would never end after countless silent winters. Footsteps sounded softly. James entered. Casual in his shirt, he carried a small wooden box. His face softened when he met Hannah's gaze as he stepped forward to offer it. "Amelia told me today is a special day," he murmured with a shy smile. Hannah opened the box to reveal a delicate silver ring, intricately crafted with a tiny engraved image of a doll Rosie. Her breath caught instantly. That evening, in a candlelit dining room, faintly redolent of cinnamon from the baked apple pie, the atmosphere was peculiarly hushed. Amelia sat between them in her floral dress, brimming with excitement, while James, the man who once commanded an empire, knelt before Hannah. "You taught me that love cannot be bought," he said, voice thick with emotion, eyes never leaving her face. "But if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life building a home where you'll never feel alone again." A gentle hush fell, soft as the first snow of winter. Then Amelia leapt from her chair, shouting, "Aunt Hannah, say yes!" Hannah laughed through her tears. She looked at James, once a stranger, then a friend, now the father of the child she'd learned to love, and saw the place she wanted to come home to every day. She nodded, whispering yes. James slipped the ring onto her finger, not as a showpiece, but as a testament to a year's journey woven from gratitude, early mornings at the hospital, bedside stories, and the bravery of a small girl who knew how to give. As Hannah looked down at the silver band gleaming in candlelight, all the moments came rushing back. She pressed her lips together, a secret ready to be revealed. "There's something I haven't told you," she said, voice trembling with feeling. "I was awarded a full scholarship for nursing last month. An anonymous donor sent the confirmation, and I only realized it came from your company's address." James bowed his head and offered a small, knowing smile, neither denying nor confirming, but speaking volumes in silence. "My dream to become a nurse, I thought it would never come true," Hannah continued softly. "But now I have it, and I have a family." Amelia stepped forward, slipping her arms around them both. Her voice rang out, innocent and true. "Now we're a team, just like Rosie promised." Together they laughed, and Hannah looked up at the mantel near the hearth where Rosie sat beside a photograph of the three of them on Alki Beach, laughing at sunset with waves lapping and the breeze carrying the whispers of days gone by. She understood at last. Rosie was more than a toy for a frightened child. Rosie was a symbol, a bridge, a witness to a love born not of power or wealth, but by the gentle touch of a heart once closed. And now, in this sunlit home, Hannah was no longer the weary server rushing through wintry nights. She was a beloved fiancée, a future mother, a nurse in training, and above all herself, fully healed, fully loved, and finally, home. Hannah's, Amelia's, and James's story reminds us that even the smallest act of kindness can mend broken hearts and build families from imperfect pieces. Rosie is more than a keepsake, is the emblem of compassion, a reminder that love always finds its way home, even in the darkest times. May this story inspire you to open your heart to those in need of light. Thank you to our viewers across the United States for joining soul-stirring stories. If this tale touched you, please like, share with friends from Seattle to New York, and subscribe so you never miss our weekly heartwarming narratives. Leave a comment sharing the moment that moved you most. We read every single one. Together, let's spread love and kindness, for like Rosie, it will always return.